We are ringing in the opening bell with Kelly Chang Rickert, the founder of Law and Mediation Offices of Kelly Chang, located in Pasadena, and has been coined as the best divorce lawyer in Los Angeles. Kelly has been practicing law since 2000 and routinely appears as a family law expert on television, radio. In addition to that, she has written 3 Amazon #1 best-selling books in law, in children's marriage, and divorce books categories. Check those out. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today. We are excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. All right, well, we're going to come out swinging. We already did an intro on some of the big divorces we've seen in the media today and questions we have. So I want to talk about Tom and Gisele right from the get-go. Apparently, according to news sources, they have quote unquote engaged in divorce attorneys. So as one of the most prominent in the field, what exactly does that mean when they actually engage an attorney? And then that being said, what's like the likelihood that divorce is on the way if that process has begun?
So a lot of times people pre-engage divorce attorneys and it doesn't necessarily lead to divorce. But a lot of times they hire them to explore what their rights and obligations are if the divorce were to happen. So I think it's probably premature to assume that they're going to file for divorce. And if they are, it's probably going to be happening anytime now because celebrities tend to keep their secrets under wrap. So somebody leaked it.
Interesting. That whole thing I find just completely fascinating. What does the timeline typically look like? Like your average timeline of someone engages in divorce versus the divorce becoming completely settled and finalized?
That could be a variety. I mean, my longest divorce case lasted 15 years.
15
And then,
years.
yeah, so the kids were like 3 and 5. And then by the time the divorce was done, they were 18 and 20. So it really runs the gamut because it depends on the issues of your case. And some couples can just keep fighting and fighting and fighting until their money is gone. Think Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And then other couples are pretty like, Tom Cruise. He was divorced with Katie, they settled within the week after it became public. So I think it just depends on the couple, depends on the prenup, and depends on which lawyers they hire.
Interesting. Now, that was one celebrity case I did not study coming into this. Brad Pitt and Angelina. What was the process of their court case? Like, so what actually happened with their settlement?
So she filed in 2016. The case was bifurcated, meaning that they have been divorced by status,
Okay.
so by status meaning you can go and get remarried. You're divorced, but the issues of custody, support, property division, that's all still outstanding. And recently, I think he filed a lawsuit against her for selling his half of the winery or something like that. So that's still going. And it's been like almost. So I don't see that divorce ending anytime soon.
That is crazy. I just can't even comprehend how, I don't know, just 7 years of constantly worrying about what's going to happen in lawsuits. It seems illogical. But aside from settlement, so once the settlement is made, and in the intro, we went over some of the largest settlements in the history of the United States. But aside from that, how can one gauge how much a divorce will cost financially? Like when you engage with an attorney, is it a flat rate? Is it an hourly rate? Is there a standard someone should think about? Like if you engage attorney, you're talking at least X amount of dollars. What would you say?
So I actually have a licensed trademark and it's marriage is grand, divorce 100 grand. So I think that that's like a good starting point if you're going to engage in a contested divorce. I think contested meaning like custody. I think 100 grand is pretty cheap if you're going to fight in your divorce. So typically lawyers charge by the hour. I think a reasonable hourly rate would be $500 per hour, all the way up to $5,000 an hour, depending on who you hire. And it just, it's a billing clock. So, and celebrities, they hire firms. So you have like the senior partner billing $2,000 an hour. You have the 3 associates billing anywhere between $800 and $450 an hour. And then you have a paralegal billing $250. So it's like easy to go through 25 grand an hour, which is how you get up into the millions. So
that is it's so tough to comprehend. That is a wild saying though. So to get married, can you say it one more time? To get married, it's a grand, but to get divorced, it's about 100 grand.
Divorce 100 grand. And that's my
That's going to be the title of this podcast. All right. What about, I think about this from your perspective. I sit down with my businesses and I do my forecasts and I'm trying to understand demand and supply and how recession could pull back. When you're in the market of family law and divorces, how do you like establish demand and what business will look like? Has it changed a lot since the pandemic? Is it pretty consistent that you'll get the same amount of divorce cases? Like, how does it look like when you're trying to project how many divorces and cases you'll get in a year?
So I've been practicing since 2000. My business has always been consistent. There's never been a bad time. So when, we had a recession in 2008, things were great then. We had pandemic, things were still great. So people, when times are good, file for divorce. When times are bad, file for divorce. So I think my industry, unfortunately, is one of those few industries that's not impacted by the recession. It's because people that can afford my services are always going to file. And then those that cannot, they will just represent themselves. But the people that can't afford attorneys, they're not going to let a recession stop them from filing for divorce, like Gisele and Tom. So
interesting. They always say find businesses that are going nowhere. People say start with death, taxes, and the son. I think we might have to add divorce to that line. Now tell me a little and about the I still can't just get away from it. The Ben and Angelina, this 7-year divorce. So you talked a little bit about the dollars and the costs. If you're doing this process for 7 years, you're talking about millions of dollars they would owe attorneys. So they're paying, and that's accumulating this entire time, or are they paying a retainer? Like, are they paying the attorneys to make sure it's cleared up? Like, how do you have a case that's outstanding for that long with those dollars?
So typically, an attorney would charge a retainer to even come in on the case. So, a sample retainer would be $25,000. You have to pay this upfront, and I will bill my hourly against it. So, if the first month I billed, let's say my hourly rate is $1,000, make it easy. 1,000 would pay for 25 hours of my service. And so, once I spend 25 hours, you're completely depleted and you have to replenish. Most attorneys have what's called an evergreen retainer. So there's like a minimum you have to keep in the account for them to continue to be your attorney. Okay. So that's what we have. We're on evergreen retainer.
Okay, interesting. Evergreen retainer. These are all new words for me. And guys, stay tuned to the recap. If they're new words for you, we will break down the definitions. All right, I'm going to get to alimony, but I want to talk strictly property. Can you explain the process in general about how a couple divides up property in the divorce, or like what is the most common way to do it?
So number one, you have to exchange financial disclosures. Basically, everything that is community property needs to be divided. Community property is only in 9 states. And even in the states that don't have community property, they have what's called equitable distribution. And so you still have to define what was acquired during the marriage, before the date of separation, and divide that part. The separate stuff, like what you came into the marriage with, that stays separate if you kept it separate. If you commingled, meaning like, let's say you came in with $1 million and then you used 200,000 to go buy something community, and the community, you've commingled it. So now you have to trace what your separate funds were to get the separate back. So it's to enter a marriage if you have a lot of assets with a prenuptial agreement, because the prenup will specifically state what your separate assets were coming into the marriage, and also your intentions. So if you want to like waive community, you can do that, and you can even waive alimony. So I'm a huge fan of prenups. Huge. Okay,
we're going to talk about prenups. Before we get to prenups, so technically, if you don't have any type of, if you commingling or not, whatever you've established before the day that you have been actually married, even though you might be working on things together, whatever, none of that matters until day 1 of marriage, correct?
Well, if you're working on things jointly, that would be, pursuant to whatever your employment contract is. So it's not like it totally exempt, just because, let's say you're working on a book with your girlfriend and you already agreed you're going to split it 50-50. Just because you're not married doesn't mean that your agreement to split it 50-50 isn't valid. It's still valid, but it's not subject to marital law until you get married.
Okay. And this is very, very big for my viewers out there, because I don't think many of them participate or utilize contracts. But in a scenario like that, if you and your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner do, let's just say, create a book together, and you say that you're going to split it 50-50, what would hold up in court? Would a text of agreement, an email agreement, or do you actually have a full written contract? Is that the only thing that would actually hold up in court if you had to go to court?
I would say yes, because he said, she said does not hold up in court. So I think anytime you're going to get into any sort of project, especially today with influencers, you need to get into a one-page contract. It's really easy. There's templates online, but it defines the scope of work and how much you guys are entitled to it. So, if it's a 50-50 project, however however it's divided has to be specifically stated, and also the duration of the project.
Contracts. All right. Now, how does alimony work specifically, and how is it calculated? I think about the Tom and Gisele scenario. Obviously, they have kids. We did research on their net worth. Surprisingly, to I think majority, Gisele has a higher net worth than Tom. So in that scenario, would Gisele be paying alimony to Tom? Like, how does that work, and how is it calculated?
So alimony is different than child support. Okay. So
good clarification. Didn't know that.
support is support of the children. And so that depends on your incomes and also how much time you have with the children. So if they share 50-50 custody and they earn approximately the same thing, there's not going to be child support. But if Gisele is retired and, whatever she's making from passive income is not as much as Tom Brady's active income, and she has the kids most of the time because he's still playing football, Tom is going to pay child support. Alimony is spousal support. That's totally different than child support. You can be ordered to pay alimony even if you do not have children with the person. So what's at stake here is child support and alimony, which is spousal support, two totally different creatures.
And
I don't think if they're worth approximately the same thing, there's probably not going to be alimony. So that it's probably just going to be an issue of child support.
And the concept behind alimony, is someone who has no idea, and if my viewers don't, the alimony case is we entered a marriage. Is the theory of this that you now live a certain lifestyle to some level, and us breaking up will allow you to live some type of similar lifestyle? What's the process of that?
Somewhat. So spousal support, also known as alimony, is based on the fact that you're supposed to, the law says that you have to support your spouse during the marriage. And so if you support your spouse during the marriage and they get acclimated to a certain lifestyle, like they don't have to work. So historically, alimony was to protect against the wayward husband that leaves his wife of 50 years for his. Okay. So like historically, this would happen where you're a stay-at-home housewife and you don't have any marketable skills. And then in your 60s or 70s, when your kids are left the house, your husband leaves you. And so spousal support was supposed to protect that woman from being on the streets, after having dedicated and served her husband for 50 years.
Of course.
Yeah. But, these days, I would say 50% of the workforce is women.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of women paying alimony these days because they do earn more. Like, for example, I live in LA, so I know a lot of like entrepreneurial women that support their actor husbands, so it's like up and down my street, it's a bunch of guys I see walking their pets and their babies, and their wives are off to their executive jobs at ABC and NBC. So definitely like in LA or New York, where a lot of women are very successful, they do now have to be ordered to pay alimony, but you can waive alimony in a prenup. So that's another thing.
Okay. These are all beautiful.
Tom and Gisele have a prenup.
I'm sure I would imagine they do. These are beautiful things that are leading into the prenup. We're going to get there real quick. Follow-up question on the alimony. How long does one typically pay alimony?
So it depends. In California, a marriage of 10 years and under, or 10 years and over, is called a long-term marriage. And so the duration for a long-term marriage is usually like longer. I'm not going to say it's forever, but it's longer. In a short-term marriage, a duration under 10 years is usually half the length. So if you were married for 1 year, you can probably expect to pay alimony for about 6 months if you're going to pay alimony. Okay. But like I said, it's like strictly based on income. So if you guys make on the same thing, you're not going to have alimony obligations.
This is absolutely mind-blowing to me. This is so fascinating. Now, okay, how about child support? Tell me a little bit about child support, how the cost is calculated, and then when does child support end?
Child support ends when the kids turn 18, or if they're still in high school, 19. If the child is disabled, that's a different situation that could go on longer. But typically child support is an algebraic formula. It's actually found in the California Family Code 4055. If you want to Google that, but we family lawyers use DissoMaster, and you just plug. So it's basically the two biggest factors are your monthly income or annual income, whatever other incomes like dividends, stocks, business interest, and rental income, and then also the percentage of time. So if you share like 50-50, and you make roughly the same, there's not going to be child support. But if you make the same amount and one of you has 80% custody and the other 20, then you're going to expect the person with 20% custody to pay child support, because the theory is that the children are paid for whoever they're with. So if you have the kids 80%, you're paying for them more. So the 20% parent would have to make up the difference by paying child support.
Interesting. So it's obviously customized to each person and their income and the percentage that they have custody and things like that. What have you seen in court that has created a situation, because we see it in like all the Hollywood movies, but that creates a situation where a parent actually has no rights to see their kid? And like I've seen, I remember like in Liar Liar, I'm remembering this scene where like he loses his rights and the woman goes off throwing a like celebrating. Is that a common thing, or is that extremely rare?
I would say, and this is in general, if you fight for custody, you will get it. And so, sometimes if you see one parent end up with custody, it's because the other parent didn't fight. Or if there's so in general, if you participated in the raising of the children together, and then you separate and you still live within close vicinity of each other, you're going to have some sort of joint shared. The situations where there would be no custody except for supervised visitation or something would be like if one parent was convicted of domestic violence, abuse, something, or one parent just moved away. And so in that case, it's impossible to have shared custody if you're in Hawaii, or New York. But generally, I would say the courts like it, because you are divorcing your ex, but your children aren't. And so it's the legislative intent that they continue to have frequent and continuing contact with both parents after separation.
Okay, I got to go to the prenup now, because I think about everything you're saying. I just see the dollar signs. Your life's work is just being snapped in half over relationship issues. Before I even ask about a prenup, seeing what you've seen, is there any validity to someone saying, why do we even get married in general? Why does the whole concept of marriage exist? Or do you think that's just outlandish?
I don't think it's outlandish. I think if you go back to like the beginning of time, I think marriage it's created by God, and it's this sacred union between a man and a woman whereby you form a family, and then the families inherit the earth, So I think family is the family structure is very important, it's the basis of our community. So I do think that marriage is very important. And I actually, myself, I'm opposed to divorce. It's really unfortunate. I've always felt like my entire life I've excelled at this work, but it's always been like kind of hard for me, because I see a lot of lawyers out there kind of, life is short, get a divorce. And they talk about marriage like it's so, like it's throwaway. And I hate that. I hate that. I hate how people view marriage as something so like easy to
transactional. Like it's not like a transaction. This is an enduring lifetime commitment. You don't just get married, get divorced, do it again, do it again, do it again. There's more to it than just like let's put a ring on it and go to the party. It's a life commitment.
And it's unfortunate. I see a lot of women, and they get $50,000 a month in alimony, but it doesn't alleviate their pain. It's like they want 50 grand. And of course the guy is probably like, well, my pocketbook hurts, but this woman's heart hurts because she didn't think that it would ever, lead to him cheating, or so it's really sad. And I see like mistakes on both ends, and it just makes me kind of sad. And so that's why I'm not a big proponent of I don't like to advertise. I'm a divorce lawyer. I hate saying that. I focus on the prenup, which is like, let's enter into a marriage carefully, wisely, prudently, and try to stay there. And so the prenup is only used in the unlikely event of a divorce or death. Right. So, sign it, put it away, and forget about it. That's what I always.
such a good perspective. We have 8 minutes, 8 minutes left here with Kelly. Before I go into prenup, I have one last question with you. And the question is all about just, you've seen, I'm sure, people at each other's throats. You just made a great comment about dollar signs do not heal a broken heart, and it doesn't matter what those are. This is more relationship advice than it is attorney or divorce law advice, but what do you think is the biggest issue with these divorces? Do you think it comes down communication? Is it usually commitment? Is it usually money? Like, if you had to attribute one reason that is the largest reason of why these divorces occur based on conversations you've heard, what would you say it is?
I honestly believe that it's because of the world. The world view of marriage is so broken now. They're trying to redefine marriage and all that stuff, and it's not going to work. So I really believe that what's missing is God in our society. And I don't know if you can put that on your podcast, but this is how I feel. And it's like, this is what I believe, and I do my job with that belief. But I really believe that the worldview of marriage is broken. And until you understand what God's view of marriage is, you can enter into a marriage and it's going to be like a spinning roulette. You could be one of the 2 marriages that fall. But unless 2 people enter with like a godly view of marriage, it's just luck, if it's going to succeed or not. So I think,
I think that's a great answer. Of course, we could keep on the podcast because I think opinions and perspectives are so important. Though I think my take on that would be, there has to be, and if God is your higher being, great, but there's got to be something larger than what it actually is as far as like contractually, because it seems as though unless you are in relationships. So my fiance right now is Canadian. Obviously, our marriage does something more, right, when it comes to citizenship and stuff like that. And then when you bind finances, marriage obviously has an impact. But other than that, if you're only looking at the transaction, it's very different it's razor thin, the difference between like dating and actually being married, other than this contract that's signed. And if you don't have this higher structure of something, then it means more. I agree. I mean, when you look at the words, it's not a big difference.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's because a lot of people enter into marriage thinking, how is this going to benefit me? And so marriage is selfless. Our worldview now is everything is self. Everybody just looks out for themselves, and so it's kind of disgusting. But until you can put yourself aside and actually care about the widow, the orphan, something like that, I don't know how a marriage is going to survive.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It's a good discussion. And you've seen a lot of marriages not survive. And we talked about it already. We've hinted at prenups. Do you have a take in general on when and if you should get a prenup? Or are you in a position where you would say every human in the world that's getting married should get a prenup?
I think every human in the world that's going to get married should get a prenup.
Okay.
And I think you already have one. A lot of people don't know this, but if you get married without a prenup, the prenup is the state law. So if you get divorced without a prenup, it's going to go according to what law the state that you live in goes. So you already have one. Whether you like it or not, your assets are going to be divided by the prenup stated by the state law. So if you don't like that law, because in California, we have community property. So everything that you acquired during the marriage is half your spouse's. If you don't like that, change it. So it's really important for creators and doctors and lawyers, people with their own businesses, because when you come in with your own business, right? If you get married, your business, even though it's separate, is going to be deemed to have marital value during the marriage. So let's say your business is worth 10 million right now,
okay,
and you get married, and then your business goes up to 100 million. That increase is going to be marital. So even though you started it, and even over time, it probably would have grown by itself, right? The law is going to say, no, it was because of your wife. She's dead. Even if your wife worked full time and didn't contribute to your business, the law assumes that. And so I think California law sucks for community property. So for spouses that work and have their own businesses, like I have a lot of musicians and actors, like creators, that this is their own creative interest. Like, why would your spouse get royalties of a song that you created? It's not theirs, right?
Crazy. How
Yeah.
does how does the business breakdown work? So suppose the company's worth 10 million, we get married, it's then worth 100 million. There's a $90 million difference. Would your partner in that scenario, if you got divorced without a prenup, then essentially have ownership of your business?
45 million of it. Yep. So
Wow.
it would go like this. The 10 million was premarital, you keep that.
Okay.
During these 90 million, 45 million is her effort. It's a joint effort.
And
Even though
can that person have any impact on like operationally how businesses are executed, or is it more that just any value or dividend or
any
anything like that?
they, nothing. So like a good example is doctor. So, I represent a lot of doctors,
Okay.
and they sometimes finish medical school and then maybe work for somebody. And then during the marriage, they'll put in all their student loans and basically build a business ground up and get it up to 100 million. And their wife, cheating with a gardener, didn't do anything, will still get half of that value of the business. And that's not even the worst of it. The worst of it is you both have to hire forensic accountants to calculate the value. And so,
Oh,
yeah. So like for you, Jason, it's like, I don't know how much my business is worth. So you're going to have to hire a forensic and pay him like 100 grand to value your business low. So your forensic is going to be like, my business is worth nothing because my name is my business. Without me, the business would fail. Then she would say, hire a forensic to value your business high, like a 500 million.
of course, of course.
Yeah. And then both of you are hiring lawyers, accountants, forensics, and it's billing you hourly. That's why I find like my industry is kind of sick. It's just, you go to these divorce conferences and it's like custody evaluator, supervisor, monitored visitation. You're just like capitalizing off people's misery,
Misery, nightmare.
Forensic.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
just wish work it out. Just,
yeah.
and feel like if it doesn't work out, you don't get my business. I don't get your business. We keep separate accounts. Maybe we have one joint account. We just divide that one.
Yeah.
But prenup and keep it simple. So when you walk away, you just walk away.
That's what's interesting is like at every business that I have, you sit down with your business partner and you go through everything, soup to nuts. What happens if I die? What happens if you die? How are we managing this? What's your role? You do it all and you sign and you're fine. But for some reason, when there's this relationship discussion about having the same exact discussion, it's like, how do we approach it? Do we talk about it? Do I skate around it? You had already mentioned, I think, which is a great response, which is we already have prenup. It's the state law. I think that's a great response. Do you have any other type of advice to someone that's listening to this that says, I tried to talk to my partner about this, I got shut down and thrown out? Any thoughts of how someone can approach this discussion, which sometimes could be a tough one to have?
I would just, I don't know. It also protects against debt. I think you could pitch that. So you could be like, my business, yeah, it's worth a lot, but I owe a ton of money. And any debt that I accumulate during the marriage is half your debt. Do you want that? Because if not, I could get sued.
Yeah.
Let's keep all our debt separate. That's another thing you can pitch it, because owning a law firm or a doctor, you're prone to get sued. And that could go against assets unless you have a separate prenup saying this is my separate debt. If I get sued, my spouse doesn't have anything to do with that.
Okay.
So
Okay. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. So $1,000 to get married, 100,000 to get divorced. Let's talk prenup. What does it cost to put a prenup together?
So a prenup is relatively, I think, cheap. I think
Okay.
for 5,000 you can get it. It basically entails you sitting down with your spouse and being like, do we want community property? Do we want to have joint debt? How are we going to handle buying stuff during the marriage? If I give you a car, let's say I give you a Tesla, is that community or do you get to keep that? So you iron out everything.
Okay.
If I have a copyright, is that mine? If I write a book, do you get, you just talk about it. And then you also talk about, we both make the same thing. Can we waive alimony? Or if you give up your job during the marriage, maybe I'll pay you, but a set amount. So I know it's called liquidated damages. Like, what you're responsible for. So you could be like, I'll pay 10,000 a month. And that way you're not rolling the dice and having to pay 50 grand a month in alimony.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. And you referenced the Brad and Angelina breakup, 7 years, they still haven't finalized the divorce. Do you think with a very clean cut prenup, you're then also decreasing the cost and time of the process of divorce?
Absolutely. I think the more clear you can make your agreement, the less likely that the lawyers can go in with their grubby hands and fight. Because
Okay,
lawyers fight. And so if you leave things fightable, they're going to fight. Lawyers love fighting.
okay.
It's not unusual to spend like 50,000 to go after an account that has 10,000 on it. It doesn't make financial sense, but people are like, he's hiding money. And so after you pay a private investigator, a forensic, somebody to trace all those, and then it's like, oh, there's only 10,000 in there, but you have to pay everybody else, and that's 50 grand.
Right.
So it's not worth it's a horrible, stay out of court. I'm actually working on a series of books called Marriage is Grand, Divorce 100 Grand. And just, keep it civil, get the prenup, and just keep it out of court, because it's kind of a dirty business. And I also watching, there's called Divorce Inc. It's like a
Okay.
documentary about divorce. It's pretty true.
Really? There's
Yeah.
validity to that. Okay.
Yeah. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, the divorce industry. And it's just these people trying to get their money from broken families.
One thing I always ask is one thing I like to give my listeners perspective on is this a career option for them, and a little transparency behind it. We're hearing some of that now. I know corporate law because I used to be a banker and work in those space. I know a little bit about injury law. Where does like family law rank on, I guess, like the lucrative end of things when it comes to deciding what field as an attorney you're going to go into?
I think depending on your clients, it could be lucrative. So if you're like Laura Wasser,
Yeah, yeah.
you have like a $250,000 retainer. I mean, obviously you're doing pretty well. But I would say family law attorneys, generally they don't make that much money. Corporate lawyers and personal injury lawyers definitely make more.
Okay, so those two, so that was right then. Corporate lawyers, injury lawyers, those are going to be on the top spectrum. What do you think like, if you had to guess, your average family law attorney in the United States on an annual basis makes around?
I would say maybe 100,000. It's not that much.
Oh, interesting. Okay, fascinating. So if you're going to get into that space, it sounds like you want the right clientele to do so.
Yeah,
With a
I would say
250K attorney, sounds like a retainer, sounds like a whole different industry.
exactly.
Okay, last question I got for you before we go into your trading secret is, you mentioned something about yeah, I want to talk about the state lines here, because you mentioned about state, like, so there are probably people right now listening that are married that don't have a prenup, but they know that their prenup is based on the state. Where do you go, or what area can someone go to see what the rules are and regulations for their state?
So a family law attorney in that state would know. So
Okay,
that would be a situation where you would consult a family law attorney, even though you're not ready for divorce, just to
okay,
find what could happen if you do get a divorce.
okay,
They
got it.
best know, how the law is applied in your situation.
Okay, and then I think about myself, I've lived in like 10 states in my life. If you get married in, let's say you get married in California where you're at, and then work brings you, I don't know, to Chicago, what
Mhm.
state are you under? Is it the current place that you're residing, or where the marriage occurred?
It would be where you file the divorce.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But
Got
you can't. So most states have jurisdictional requirements. So like if you live in New York and you move to LA, you can't just immediately file a divorce in California. You have to wait 6 months.
got it.
So jurisdictional. So a lot of people move out here and file for separation first, because there's no jurisdictional requirement for separation. And then at 6 months, convert it to divorce. And I think Las Vegas is like 3 weeks or something, 6 weeks. So if you live in Vegas, 6 weeks, you can file a divorce. So it really depends on the state.
Got it. Oh my God. It's a mind blowing, like it's just, there's so many things in life. There's so many curveballs that life throws your way, and there's so many things that you have to deal with. And then to think about all the hoops and ladders and things you got to jump through divorce. It's wild. And I read this morning that divorce rate in the United States, it's 2.9 people for every 1,000 humans in the United States are getting divorced. So a lot of people are dealing with this. The numbers are crazy.
I would
Say it
think it
again.
was, that sounds kind of low, 2.9 out of 1,000. I would think it was higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what I saw was like based on the 45 states that submitted, but I think that accounts for like every living human. Like if you were a
Oh,
6-month-old, you're included in that. It's not like per married people.
got
Crazy
it.
stuff. But let's wrap with a trading secret. So a trading secret, something that someone can't find in a textbook, learn in a classroom, but they can learn from you, Kelly, on this scenario in life. What trading secret can you leave us with?
I think work on the marriage. Working on your marriage is the best way to save money. That's my trade secret. You don't need to think lawyers, forensics, evaluators, all these silly people that you have to pay. Just work on your marriage, and find commonality. Like you said, find a higher purpose outside of yourself. And, you know, marriage is a blessing. I've been married for 16 years, and we have a family, and I would do anything. Like I would give up my career like that if it was, to save my marriage. It
I
just,
Well, I mean, it's such a good way to end a trading secret from someone who does this every day when the entire thing that sparked this discussion is career management based on Tom Brady still playing, Gisele getting sick of it, and them engaging in divorce attorney. So, Kelly, this has been extremely informative, very insightful. Where
oh,
can people find some of the books that you have going on? And for the next series of books, where should people go when you have your next announcement on them?
oh, thanks. I guess they can just follow me on social media at LawyerKelly. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and there I have a link to my bio. I have a blog that I update weekly, so you can subscribe to it and you can buy my books on Amazon.
Perfect. Lawyer Kelly, everybody, you just heard everything she said. Go follow her and you'll hear more. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Take care.